Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Makes a Picture Perfect Estimate webinar. I'm Nicole Neese. I'm the Director of Marketing of Simsol. Today, we're going to be sharing the best practices for organizing and setting up a claim, writing the perfect scope, as well as tips and tricks to creating a flawless estimate. Our special guests for this webinar to share their insights are Mike Carli. He is the President of All Season Adjusting. And we also have Steve Van Pelt. He is the Vice President of Claims for Jackson Adjustment. All right, we're going to go through the agenda now. We're first going to talk about the key components of an estimate. Then we're going to go into preparing the claim, the importance of pictures, talk about the inspection. Then we're going to talk about claim documentation. Then we're going to go into writing the scope. And then we're going to finish it up by talking about the narrative report and working with your examiner. All right, I am now going to turn it over to Danny. He is going to be presenting, and our panelists are going to be providing their insights. All right, hello, Danny.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Nicole, for that great introduction. Thank you to our panelists that wanted to come on and actually share their experience. I think you're going to find this very educational. So let's get to it. So I just want to make sure, Mike, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. How about Steve? Steve, are you on the line?
I am here, Danny.
Well, excellent. You guys sound real good. So we have a large audience today. So I think that you know, your insight will give you guys a great benefit. So let's get to it. This what we're going to be discussing here is how to create a perfect claim. And there's a lot of components on doing that, okay? And for example, Nicole went over, you know, some of the other components that we're going to be talking about, but some of these will include the preparation of inspection of the claim, the initial contact with the insured, the actual inspection of the loss, the importance of photos to a claim, and I know that both of y'all are going to really go into that. Creating and submitting any claim documentation, obtaining or requesting third-party information or information that you need from the insured, creating a square foot evaluation. Really not going to go into that, but just be aware that you need to do that. We're going to go into some of the exterior estimates that you need to look at, creating interior estimates, contents estimates, and then we want to spend a lot of time on creating that final report for you. And then we want to wrap it up with, you know, submitting to the examiner and you know, for example, submittal and corrections from the examiner. Okay, so the first part, what I'm going to do is go into a topic, and then I'm going to open it up to our panelists and let them go at it. And so the first thing we're going to be doing is a preparation of the claim. I have a couple of things that we want to ask. It says, well, one couple statements here is, do not wait for the last minute to prepare your claim, which I think is real important. They're going to address that. Prepare the computer with the latest estimating software, and this is really important. Why is that? We believe that you need to have the latest and greatest pricing table so you can actually be on a level playing field. Check your camera and reliability. These are just some of the things that you know, you all know of. Make sure we have specialized equipment, your measuring tape, batteries, all that good stuff. And download, what I usually do if we go on storm is download the latest homeowners, flood, or pricing from either the carrier, excuse me, the homeowners policy or the flood policy. That is supplied for flood, it's done by FEMA.gov. And if it's a homeowners, you can check with your carrier. And then you want to read, now this is an important one here, is that you want to review the estimate policy guidelines supplied by your adjusting company. I think they're going to go into that a little bit, okay? But what you might want to do for if you're a flood adjuster is try to download the latest adjuster manual from nfip.gov. So we have a website that we'll give to you. That's www.nfip.gov website. So Mike, would you like to take some of those different questions that we have here?
Sure. Basically, let's start at the beginning. To make a good claim file, it starts at the time you get the first notice of loss. You need to review it. You need to understand, what type of property is that you're going to be looking at, making sure that the policy appears to be written on the type of resident. I mean, you don't want to look at a dwelling, you don't want to look at a commercial loss with a dwelling policy. So you got to make sure that aligns so that when you do make that initial call, you're talking to the insured confidently that, I see you live here, it's a single family home, blah, 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 blah. So you've got to make sure you're reviewing the documentation before you make that first call. Your professionalism on that initial call goes a long way. People will sense that you are knowledgeable, you are prepared, and that you're asking questions that they may think they already know the answers, but you'll get the correct answers. So when you make that initial call, of course, be understanding, empathetic, review the coverages, and then set your time for inspection within, as soon as you can possibly do it. I know there are some, carriers that will require expedient type of inspections and stuff like that. But doing things quickly is not necessarily doing things correctly or thoroughly. One of the things when you look at your estimating software and pricing, you need to make sure you update that, because in a big storm, FEMA will come out and tell us and tell the community, hey guys, listen, we want you to make sure you are understanding of market conditions relative to costs. Please make sure your databases are updated accordingly and that you're accounting for the market conditions, because the last thing that a flood claim needs to be is underpaid, let alone overpaid. So make sure you get your right unit cost, you update your database to the correct zip code, and make sure you're doing a solid for the insured that you are making sure that your systems are updated. Make sure that once you're looking at that first notice of loss, if it's a general property and you're only authorized to do a residential, you may want to call you should be calling the supervisor who's assigning those claims to let them know that this is out of your authorization level. And normally the supervisor will take that file and assign it to the appropriate authorized adjuster, and then give you a claim to credit you back for the one you just lost that's appropriate for your authorization. If you come across a claim where your authorization is over your head or over your level of expertise, you're going to need to call the supervisor and get some guidance. Don't ever feel like you're underwhelmed. Just be over-prepared. Looking up at your cameras, I'm always the believer that disposable batteries are great, because when you are at a site and you lose battery power on your rechargeable batteries and your camera doesn't work anymore, that doesn't look too good. So I always prefer to get the cameras with AA batteries, slide them in, slide them out when they're dead. Always have at least 2 backup cameras to the one you're using, because you never know when 2 could go kaput. Equipment, batteries with distos and measuring equipment, flashlights, make sure you got good batteries. Your tape measure, make sure you got a nice big, clear, clean, numbered tape measure, like a 1-inch wide blade where you stick it up against the wall. The flood line numbers are easily readable. That's very important. The policies, make sure you read the dwelling policy every single day during a storm. It may be boring, but eventually you'll learn that some of the things that don't make sense in week 1 make sense in week 3 if you're reading it at least every day. Understanding you're not going to be able to read it every day because you'll get through the first 5 pages and something will come up. But continue to persevere in reading the policy. Go ahead, Danny.
I wanted to ask Steve, does your organization provide some type of policy guidelines that you give to every adjuster, a sample narrative report or something like that, what you expect, what your guidelines
Absolutely.
are going to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to make sure that we're doing a consistent job with every adjuster on every claim. So we do give out the narrative because we want that to follow a consistent pattern so that it's easy to review the files. We know what we're going to expect when we're looking at them. The carrier knows what to expect when they're looking at them. And obviously there's going to be the guidelines on the adjustment side for the estimating. So in order to have it be consistent, that needs to happen. The adjusters, if they are lost, they need to reach out to the supervisor and get the help there. And then it's up to our examiners to sort of enforce that everything is being done consistently so that we have a good product to send out to everybody.
Excellent. Okay.
Could I follow up with that, Danny?
Sure.
Most adjusting firms in the flood industry use a similar template reports. We do. And the reason being is McDonald's is successful because the food tastes almost the same everywhere in the country, right? And they have a high expectation, and people have a high expectation of the food that they're getting. Same thing, you can parallel with the same thing with the flood claim, and relative to the narrative, the consistency of the documentation, everything in there raises the level of professionalism with the adjuster and the IA firm that you're working for to make sure that your credibility, your professionalism is being consistent in the product you're producing. That's why a lot of IA firms will use a template report, because they want everything to be the same and to be consistent and to be professional, so that when that examiner ultimately reviews that report, they're saying, hey, Steve did a great job, because it's all there.
Excellent. Well, we got a lot of questions to go through. So Nicole, can we go to the next slide, please? Very good. Okay, on the next part is the initial contact with the insured. I know this is dear to pretty much everybody. The initial contact with the insured is the most important component during a claim. It's vital that the contact with the insured be done ASAP within 24 hours of receiving the loss, is what I have been told. The initial contact sets the whole tone and pace of the claim, I think. The insured will need to feel secure and comfortable that his or her claim is being handled by a claims professional. And the adjuster will address a lot of their questions and requests and can also give them a call at any time. There's one thing that I got from Mike. He always told me, make the insured your partner. And he'll probably go into that. Explain the adjuster's main responsibility is explain the claim process, what is expected with the insured as well. The flood will provide the insured, the adjuster will provide the insured a copy of the flood policy booklet and contents Excel spreadsheet. I believe that's a good thing to do. Try to obtain a preconception evaluation of the claim is what I've always tried to do. Hey, do you have an evaluation of your property? If you ask the insured, okay? And any requests or any pertinent information that you need. If it's a prior loss, there's a prior loss from the FNOL, try to get them prompt to get the paid receipts, so that we can get that started. And then try to make a solid appointment with the insured. So I'll open it up with that. Those were just some of the comments that I've got when making contact with the insured. How about you, Steve?
Okay, I do think that first call is one of the most important parts of the entire claim, because that's where you're going to establish the relationship with the insured. And what I found and what I've always taught is to always give the insured the opportunity to tell their story. And you want to establish that relationship by allowing them to tell you what their concerns are, what happened, their anxieties, what's on their mind. And you want to start a good conversation with them. And it is all about them. You want to make sure that they feel that they are the most important person to you, and that this claim is the most important claim that adjuster is doing. So with that in mind, the adjuster is not going to go into their personal lives, what's going on with them, how busy they are. They're going to stick to listening to that insured and then answering their questions and then making it clear to the insured that they are the advocate for them, that this is a partnership, as Mike said yesterday when we discussed this, and that you're going to be there to ensure their success. So they don't have the idea that it's going to be an adversarial relationship. If you are successful at communicating this on that first call, everything is going to go smooth. They're not going to call the adjusting company anxious, concerned, or with complaints about the adjuster. And from the adjusting company side of things, that's the leading barometer of how an adjuster is doing, how many calls we get from their insureds. If we don't hear from any of the insureds from a particular adjuster, things are probably going pretty smooth. But if the same name keeps coming up over and over again due to poor communication, then we know something's going on and we have to intervene. Obviously, you want to prepare them for what the process is going to be with all the documentation, and especially on a commercial loss, you're going to want to make sure that you have all of that in order, because sometimes that can be the holdup on an advance if you don't have the proper documentation. So the adjusting company is going to provide what's needed so the adjusters know what they need to get ahead of time, so that you can smoothly do an advance payment and get the claim going as soon as possible.
Excellent. Did you want to chime in there, Mike, on anything of those topics?
No, Steve hit the nail on the head. You know, that initial call is very important. You know, when you're at the loss site, you know, prepare the documentation. Make sure you have the your flood questionnaire prepared, you know, ready for them, for the insured to hand to them, and then go over it with them. I mean, talk to the insured. You know, make them your partner. Let them help you scope their claim. You know, help them help you so you can help them. And you know, you can get a lot of information, you know, from a policyholder if you make them your partner.
All right. So if you can't reach the insured, then what are the things that you might, you know, want to do? Like, for example, the phones might not be in service. One thing you could do is contact the insured's agent for contact information. And another thing I wanted to bring up, and I thought maybe one of you all might have picked it up, was try to use your agents as much as possible. They want to help their insureds just as much as we do. So try to involve them as well. Anyways, leave a message with the insured's door if they're not there. Contact your adjusting company with a status report or the or along to the carrier as well. They'll forward it off to them. Anything you want to chime in on any of those, Steve?
That pretty much covers it, although I do like that it's a bonus to show initiative to the insured's agent. So you always want a bonus when you're out there doing claims. But yes, the agent's going to be your number one source if the numbers aren't good and you can't get a hold of them. You can always try sending a text message to the number that's on the first notice of loss. And being careful when you do approach the property when you haven't set an appointment to leave a message on the door, because sometimes it can be pretty sketchy with people protecting their properties or neighbors looking out for each other. So always make sure you're aware of your surroundings, keep yourself safe, and definitely send up a status report if contact is difficult, so that the carrier and the adjusting company know that you're making all necessary attempts.
Great. Next slide, please, Nicole. Thank you so much. All righty. Some of the inspection tips here that we've got is probably our next subject here. And some of the things I've got is, like, for example, always make sure to use your GPS devices. Google Maps is a real good, excellent. Waze is very popular. And some of the stuff will show you a street view in Google Docs, so that's good. Use a predetermined inspection pattern for every loss. What does that mean? I've always been told you always start at the same spot, maybe at the entrance of the house, and then you can either, you know, run a clockwise or counterclockwise, whichever you want. And then you're going to end up at the same position that you started. So that means you're going to pick up pretty much every area. Okay. And another thing that you might want to do is a closure meeting with the insured. I think Mike wants to talk about that before you leave the inspection. You want to go over everything, anything that you need to talk about. it's a good idea to check the street for any indications of flood. That's usually what I do when I first come into a loss. Like, for example, do I see debris lines? Do I see furniture out, at the curb or anything like that, that kind of tells you, hey, there's a flood in progress going on. And then also monitor your local media resources. Flood brings the press, as they say. So, Mike, do you want to take any of those?
Sure. One of the things, once you get to the site, of course, you've got to use GPS and things like that. I can remember using the old paper maps, ADC paper maps, and the house is located on A12, and you had to figure it out. But nowadays we have GPS. Make sure that when you're out at the loss site, take a photograph of the loss mailbox, make sure it matches the FNOL. When you are doing an inspection, it's not prudent to go high, go through your pleasantries and everything, and then walk around the house, walk around the inside, and while you're walking at about 7 miles an hour, snap photographs and then say, okay, goodbye, see you later, and write an estimate. Now that doesn't work in today's world. We teach here at ASA to at least, when you get out of your truck or car, go through your pleasantries with the insured, and then have the insured follow you around the house, clockwise, counterclockwise, and do it twice. Let the insured talk to you about what's happened and what their concerns are with the outside of the house. And, on the second walk around, take your photographs. Have the insured hold up the tape, point it out to the flood line. Hey, this is where it happened. Do that. Again, you're getting the policyholder to be your partner in adjusting your claim. When you're on the inside of the house, the first thing we recommend is walk around the house in the same manner as you did the outside, counterclockwise, clockwise, whatever your system in your head works for you. Walk around without taking notes or any photographs, but just get a sense of what is there, so you get an understanding. And then talk to the insured at the same time. And then once you're done with that initial walkthrough, say to the insured, hey, listen, I'm going to walk through again, and I'm going to take my scope notes. I'm going to take my photographs. I'm going to document the loss so that I can properly write the estimate. And then once you're done with that, now the insured may want to hold the tape for you and follow you around, and that's fine. They're your partner. So, but once you're done with that walk around, and you want to actually sit there or stand if you can, and show them your scope notes. Review everything you went down and took pictures of it and measurements. And in the meantime, write down the big content items that were damaged. Say, hey, listen, notice you had a sofa, chair in the living room. I put this amount on the sofa, this amount on the chair. By the way, how old is it? Are these numbers pretty good for you? They'll tell you, and they'll give you the age. They'll say the number's too high or too low. But continually, engage your partner to confirm what those large content items are, and also, the scope items. Once you get through that walk around and you've done that, and then you've sat down, you've talked to them, the insured is saying, hey, this lady is really taking their time. They're really bringing me into their process. I feel like I'm going to get, receive a good claim adjustment because they've answered my questions, they explain their scope, they explain what they're doing. All I can ask for now is, where's my advance? And from there, you let them know what you can, offer in advance, and then upload that advance that same day or the following morning as soon as you can.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to move on. That goes right into one of the topics that is probably dearest to both panelists, is going to be the importance of pictures. The importance of pictures, certain things that I've got here on is determine take an overall view of photo. And what photos do is determine a valid claim. It tells you, do I have a claim or do I not have a claim? So try to take, water lines, like as Mike says, take a large width tape measure, put it on the wall, and take a couple shots. Now, I don't just take one. What I try to do is take 3 shots per wall or of the area. for all the walls. That way you've got it every single time. You know, photos are cheap. You know, in this day of digital photos, it doesn't cost anything to get those pictures. So snap away on that. Another thing is an overall view of the photo. They're going to go into this though, but try to take an overview of the room so you can grab everything on it, as well as the close-ups. Okay, and I always try to take photos of anything that's out of the ordinary that catches my eye. Also, all your contents items. One that I'd like to do is take maybe a photo of top inside the kitchen cabinet, showing the countertop is screwed in and glued into the main cabinet. That might be a very instrumental picture. So try to take as many pictures as you can. And Steve, what do you think about the importance of pictures making that perfect claim?
Well, the photos are the most important part of the claim because they are the documentation of the damage and what exists there that we're going to be estimating. So you can't understate how important it is to get these good photos. And looking at these notes here, the logical order, obviously that's going to help you out when you're doing the estimate, because if you jump around with your photos, it's going to be very hard to put them together with your estimate when you're putting your file together. The best thing you want to do is not to overload with the photos. You have snap away there, take as many photos as you can. I wouldn't advocate taking 3 or 4 pictures of the same thing just from a slightly different angle, but making sure that you get every image of a room from each corner so that you can see the floor, the walls, the ceiling, and then move on to the next corner. But don't take 2 or 3 from each corner because that's going to slow you down as an adjuster. Make sure you're taking pictures of all the windows, doors. You want to see the trim. You want to measure the baseboard trim, take a picture of that. You want to open up all closet doors to see what kind of shelves are in there or if there's any built-in cabinetry. In kitchens, like you said, you want to take a picture of the countertop, but you also want to take a picture of the quality of the cabinetry so that you price it accurately. So you want to open up the drawers, see how the cabinets are built and see what the hinges look like. But the most important thing is to actually document the damage. So sometimes there's only 1 inch of water, and if you take just overview photos, it's going to look like a real estate agent took the photos and it's just showing the property and how beautiful it was. But it doesn't show the damage, and that doesn't document the claim. So you have to get down, get those up close photos of the damage. If they're hard to find, you just got to keep following the wall, opening up doors, find those water lines, make sure you document that, because if you leave the property without doing that, and then you submit the claim and it gets to the carrier and they kick it back, you don't have the photos to do anything else with it. And at that point, you lose credibility with the insured because you're either going to have to go back there and do it again, or you're going to ask them for assistance because you didn't do your job right the first time. So make sure every single thing in the property is visible in these photos. Make sure you have every angle. Make sure you're documenting the damage, not just the existence of these items. And I also advocate for, doing your scope on one pass, then going through the house again, taking the pictures of the building damage. And then I would also take a picture of each of the content items if they're still in place. Sometimes the insureds lay them out, take pictures and submit those to the adjusters, and that's great. If they haven't done that, you don't want to rely on that or wait for them to do it, because that could hold up the claim and that makes you look bad. So you want to take a picture of each item so that it's easy to estimate and put into the estimate in the order in which you take the picture. So you go through each room again, and it's a lot faster than documenting everything on paper because you can write the estimate based on the photos. So that's going to be a big help, especially if they never get that list to you. If they get sick or something happens, you're in trouble if you didn't take those pictures.
Okay, and how about you, Mike? Is there anything that you would like to bring to light?
Well, this whole webinar is what makes a picture perfect estimate. And reality is, pictures are your best friend. At the end of the day, make sure you are taking the overall pictures of the room. Too many times we have seen blurry photographs. I can't see or determine what it is. You have to stop. You have to take the appropriate picture, stand there, tilt the camera down a little bit, get an overall view of the room, take pictures of your cathedral ceilings. We advocate that, we want at least 4 overall pictures of the room. And that means stand in every corner and take a picture shooting the photograph to the opposite corner. We need to see everything as well as the examiners, but all in all, Steve hit the nail on the head here, and I really can't add much to it. So,
excellent. Let's move on to the next slide, please. There's some more on importance of photos, and I can't stress enough, if you have to buy a good camera. I mean, you have to buy good equipment, and a zoom feature is definitely a good thing. Get a good lens, get a good zoom. And another thing, as Steve said, was that logical order. So we're going to move on to our next topic.
Well, let me bring up one point on photos. When you're in the field, you have some appliances like HVAC systems, hot water heaters. Make sure that when you have a camera that we call a macro or zoom, that you take a picture of the manufacturer label if it's accessible. Very important, especially regarding prior losses, where you think the unit hasn't been replaced. Just a little insight.
Those are the ones that come out blurry.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on to exterior inspection. A lot of good things on this one. What I usually do is try to determine if there's a general condition of flood. That's what we really need to, if we're doing a flood claim, or if we're doing a hail claim, we need to identify how many hail hits we have. So pictures do that for us, but during our exterior inspection, we have to determine if it is a flood claim or if it's not. Document those water lines. Really try to find, if you can't find it, Steve, what would you do if you can't find a exterior water line?
If it's just not there, say you got the notice of loss late, the claim happened 2 months ago and the evidence is gone. The insured has no pictures. I just had this situation 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I advised the adjuster to go talk to the neighbors, which is a viable option. And the neighbor had pictures during the flood showing from their house, looking at the insured's house, showing the water there. And that was what we needed to determine a general condition of flood. And without it, it was going to be kind of tough, because this was also a claim where the water just got over the sill plate and was under the wood floors and made them warp. So there was no interior flood lines either. But because we got those pictures from the neighbor and the weather reports from that time that did confirm that there was a significant rainfall, you put that together with a good explanation, and you're not going to have any issues with that at all. Obviously, the other points that you have, looking for debris, it is good to see, if all there's muck piled up on one side of the house or near the drainage ditches to show that there was water flow. The grass might be laying down in a particular pattern as a result of it, things like that. It's a case-by-case situation, but you have to gather all the evidence you can. So when you can't find it, weather reports, neighbors, any pictures, hopefully they have it when the claim is in progress. And definitely listen to the insured and find out what happened, where it was, and that's how you're going to be able to piece it together a little easier.
Okay, and the last bullet that we have, it says, look for foundations, Mike. What are you looking for foundation damage? Or
well, as a flood adjuster, I'm not qualified as a structural engineer.
Well, that's true, but you have to start the ball rolling, I think, right?
Yes. So what we look for is I don't want to use the word settlement because I'm not an engineer, but we look for issues structurally that we would have to identify and review it with our supervisor to determine if an engineer is required, and if an engineer is required based upon cracks in a foundation wall or slabs settling due to consolidation of soils, different things like that, we would have to upload an engineer request to inspect that to either validate it or non-validate it. But as a flood adjuster, You can look at this stuff, but do not comment on coverage until you've spoken to your management and or an engineer has been assigned and has determined if that type of crack or settlement is related to the flood or not.
Okay, excellent. Let's go to the next slide. All right, now we're talking about crawl space inspections. So I know that's real dear to your heart, Steve. So inspecting the crawl space, I think it's a vital task to obtain the damage of information. And usually what happens is that the water is still lingering inside the crawl space because that really drained out. So what happens, what kind of the things that you look for when you're looking at the crawl space inspection, or do you have to actually come back when it's all dried out? What do you want to run on that topic?
Is that me because it's near and dear to me?
Yes, it is.
Well, when we're looking at a crawl space, you know, sometimes there are mechanicals in there too, which you have to get to in order to get the serial numbers to compare them versus a prior loss, or to have them if there's a future loss. But in those cases, usually it's a little more accessible, the height-wise, so at least you can do a frog walk or something like that. But on those smaller ones, tighter, you do have to get pictures of the supports. So you want to see basically how many supports there are. You want to make sure, you know, that you're not seeing any structural damage that there might be an engineer for. You want to see if there's a water line in the crawl space. You want to see if the joists are affected in the crawl space, if there's insulation or belly board in the crawl space. And you have to get enough pictures of them to justify that it's throughout the entire crawl space and to document the damage to them. In addition to HVAC, ductwork. So you want to see the water lines on those. So you don't have to get in it entirely in order to accomplish this. If you do have the selfie stick to get in there a little further, as long as you have good enough lighting, so you might need an exterior source of light, a good flashlight that's going to illuminate so that the pictures come out clear enough. You need enough documentation because it's understood in some of those you just can't get in them and under them, so you just need to see enough.
Okay. How about, do you count the vents at all, or try to make some type of documentation of how many vents the insured has and how high the vent is, or any of that information? Yes,
you want to take pictures of all that. You can get that, if you can take pictures of them from the inside, that's great. From the outside, any of the vents on the outside, you just want to take as many pictures of it so that you can estimate it based on those pictures, so that you have everything you need. So if you can see it, you can estimate it.
Okay, great. Anything
also take a measurement of the height of the vent from the ground.
Right.
Because there's certain requirements under floodplain regulations that those vents have to be.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide, please, Nicole. And this is going to be the interior inspection. I just have a couple quick notes. Start at the front of the entrance, as we've stated before, and work clockwise or counterclockwise. You want to take good waterline photos with the tape. And I have do not get distracted by the insured, but you know, the insured is going to be following you along, but you've got to stay focused on trying to write that scope as accurate as possible, and also try to take the most best pictures that you can do. Probably Mike has something to say about that one. And then I just kind of sketch each room, including the dimensions, and account for all the room components. I think that's pretty important. And remember to document no damage as well as damaged items. So Mike, what do you think on that?
Well, you're right. You know, let's talk about taking photographs of no damage. And there have been times, and Steve will agree with this, where a policyholder will say this was damaged and we don't have a photo of it, and difficult to get a photo of it. So it's always important to take photographs of non-damaged items just in case it comes up. And also, since the insured is your partner in reviewing this, you ask them, well, listen, I see that this, this desk or whatever, it appears to have no damage to it. is that correct? Always suggest a positive response to the insured. It's part of being, you know, I hate to say it, a salesman, because as a flood adjuster, you are somewhat of a salesman. Always be positive, always suggest, you know, the fact that, hey, this desk looks like it's okay, would you agree? You know, if they say no, then you say, okay, can you help me document the damage to this desk? You know, can we look at it more closely? Again, they're your partner in helping you, you know, validate their claim. Taking pictures of the flood lines, of course, that's pretty obvious. Sketching each room to identify closets, offsets, you know, windows, doors, very important. So, you know, overall, that was a good slide, Danny, thanks.
All righty. Another thing that that's a good idea is also don't leave any money on the table is what I'm talking about there. My one example that comes to me is if you've got shoe molding on top of a 4-inch base. So that's 2 different line items normally. So just be aware that you might have a combined moldings, 2 pieces of moldings put together on top of each other. And a new adjuster, they would just say, okay, 4-inch molding, and there you go. So, you know, you want to try to, you owe what you owe is what I've always been told and what you've always told me. So that's one of the big thing. And that comes with good measurements, of course, and other things that don't leave money on that table. So anything you have to say about that one?
You're right.
Anything, Steve?
Yeah, I don't like to leave money on the table because usually someone comes by, picks it up, then you're out. You're out the money.
And if the insured leaves money on the table, make sure it stays there.
Actually, that's a good point. If you're doing an inspection and you come across money, a jar of money, any kind of money, you immediately take a picture of it and let the insured know you've identified there's money there so that they know if it's missing, it wasn't you. So I always do take a picture of it and let the insured know.
Excellent. Any other type of things when you're inspecting the loss? Any tips that you might think of?
Be thorough, take your time. If you rush an inspection, an insured will notice that and think they are being shortchanged. You know, make sure you allow enough time for each inspection and that you've answered all their questions prior to you leaving for your next claim.
Okay, good information. Let's go to the next slide, please, Nicole. Here we have post-inspection documentation. There's certain things that have to be submitted to the carrier. And like, for example, if you're doing a flood claim, you have an NFIP preliminary report within 15 days. Your adjustment company will probably say that they need it within 24 hours after assignment or something of that nature. Wind claims require an initial status report. Also, the preparedness of an advance payment to the insured is also encouraged. You know, using your estimate platform to create these reports, so check with the owner's manuals on the software companies to give you that, and attach all the relative photos to the various reports. And big thing is what I want to do is put the right picture. Like, for example, you're going to take advanced payments, so you want to probably show the most damage that you can, so that justifies the request of money that you're wanting to give to the insured. So anything on that, Steve, that you want to expand upon?
Well, that's pretty clear there. However, I would recommend, especially with flood claims with those preliminary reports, to do those the same day that you do the inspections, especially during a catastrophe situation. Because if you sit on those and you do 5 inspections in one day, 5 the next, 5 the next, and you're not getting those prelims done, then you've got 2 days after the inspections where you're just doing prelims, which are already late, which are already causing stress for the adjusting company. So get good at doing those. And if you haven't done them in a while, do some practice ones when you see that there's potential for a CAT to happen. Or if you just have spare time now, just like Mike said, read that manual as well. But get good at those. Make sure you can do them in 20 minutes. And you can, no matter what software you're using, if you get into the pattern and make it a habit. You can get those done in 20 minutes so that you have enough time to rest and do it all again tomorrow and you're up to date. So that's the important thing on these post-inspection documentation.
Excellent.
One thing, just you have the prelim, you have the advance payment. Do not sit on advance payments submittals. The sooner you get those up, the better. Sometimes they're probably more important in the prelim, but please make sure you get advance payments out there. In any kind of industry, wind, flood, I know with FEMA, they really, really stress getting the advance payments out on every claim. They love seeing money going out. They love seeing our tax-paying dollars going out to the affected flood policies.
Excellent. Well, I want to journey on here. So can we go to the next slide, Nicole? This is just writing the exterior scope, just certain things that we have here that we have, 100-foot measuring tape. As Steve says, address the type exterior finish for each wall, paint, stucco, hardy board, vinyl siding. Document any equipment, make, model, serial, as Mike has stated. Draw the exterior sketch. What I like to do sometimes is use that elevation area if it's in your software program for each wall for different finishes. Document any foundation issues or cracks. And like I said before, we have a recurring theme here, document no damage as well as damaged items. So we're running short on time here. I want to just move on to our next slide, please. All right, writing our contents. On contents items, we need to be detailed, make, model, serial number, as Steve has said and Mike has said. We also have some items that are normally more field boxes when you're dealing with contents for right in the software program itself. You're going to have, for example, make, model, serial for a field box. You need to address that, plus the age of the item. So another thing is contents is on pretty much all the software companies is going to be the sales tax is not just a percentage of the subtotal. Sales tax is done by line item, so just be aware of that. So you're going to need to know that you need to address sales tax on every single line item if it is applicable. And also keep your contents order when you're creating your areas and the line items as coinciding with your building estimate. Okay, so if you started in the living room, make sure your building estimate starts off with the living room first. Then on your contents estimate, have the living room started there. So you want to be in the same order. Okay. So anything you'd like to bring up on writing the contents estimate, guys? Anybody want to chime in?
I'll go here. Just the most important thing, again, with the photographs, from an examination standpoint, when we're looking at the contents list, we're going to be looking at the photos at the same time on another screen. So if the photos line up with the content items, that makes life so much easier for the examiner. And if they don't, these contents estimates can take hours to review to try to find all the photos, because if it doesn't exist, they don't accept them unless they make an exception for a big storm where they allow you to group items. You need to have the pictures of the items in order to do it. So again, none of this stuff is really exciting, but when I do see a complete contents photo list that corresponds with the contents items, especially when there's 200-300 items, I actually do get excited because I know I'm going to be done in 10 minutes. We're going to push this one through and it's going to make some people happy. So that adjuster, as Danny had before, gets a bonus there because that makes life easier for everybody.
How about you, Mike?
I think you hit the nail on the head, so we're good.
Okay.
That's 3 times. All right.
third time's a charm. All right. We're going to, I just want to go and talk about a little bit about the creating of the interior. And I just wanted to bring this up is that, certain adjustment companies come up and said, well, flood claims, certain carriers demand painting of the first coat to be up 1 foot above the cut and then the drywall. Then you have the second coat to be applied full height. if you have something like that, look into a macro operation using your software. They can easily do it for you. But I did want Mike to comment on, is that a standard practice that's happening out in the flood world?
The question exactly, Danny, again?
Is that, you know, specialized adjusting, like for example, for doing your painting 1 foot above the drywall cut, and then for the first coat, and the second coat would be the full height of the wall?
Well, it all depends on the carrier you're working for, because some carrier, you know, every carrier has specific guidelines, TPAs as well. I mean, some carriers will say, hey, listen, you got clean drywall just installed 4 feet above the butt joint. You know, once you do this backling, we'll allow you to paint, you know, an extra foot above the 4 feet from the ground as a primer, and then we'll let you paint the entire wall with 1 coat. You know, it all depends on the carrier you're working for or the third-party administrator, and also what your IA firm's guidance is. Getting on to the narrative report, a lot of the narrative reports are template reports. If you don't remember anything from this conference call, remember this: read your narrative 3 times before submitting it. Your narrative is key relative to the intelligent level of that adjuster. Spelling mistakes, bad. Grammatical mistakes, bad. Leaving template items in place in the narrative without reviewing them, really bad. You know, at the end of the day, read your reports 3 times. That narrative is going to tell that examiner and that carrier the story of the claim. Read it. You know, I know it took me a long time to become, you know, somewhat proficient at writing a narrative report. But you know what? Practice makes perfect. In a storm, after you've written 20, 30 narrative reports, it should come secondhand, where you're not making the mistakes. You're not making the spelling mistakes or the grammatical mistakes or leaving template suggestion items there to click your brain to fill it in. There are a lot of people in this industry that dislike narrative reports. Template narrative reports. But the reason why, you know, a lot of companies use them is to trigger the adjuster's brain that when you're filling in a caption narrative, you should be commenting about this and that. If it was left up to a lot of adjusters, it would just say, house flooded, see estimate, pay me my money. You know, that's not reality nowadays. You have to write a clear, detailed, concise report relative to the damages. If I'm wrong, please tell me.
Oh, that sounds like great advice. How about you, Steve?
With the narrative report, it is sort of an art form. And the most important part to me is in the, you know, the building adjustment explanation is to explain why you're doing what you're doing, not what you're doing. Because if you just say, oh, I'm allowing for cleanup, I'm allowing for drywall, I'm allowing for this, and you keep going down the list, that's great. It doesn't do anything for me. I'm going to see that in the estimate. But if you explain why you're doing what you're doing, so any of the bigger items, you know, if you're going to charge more for drywall because they have the bullnose or they have the wraps around the windows, explain that. You won't have a problem increasing the cost for the drywall because you explained it. If you're going to allow for a heavy muck out, just explain it. Explain how deep it was, what the process is. Sometimes the examiners don't understand the building items that you're trying to adjust. So if you explain what it is, how you arrived at the price and what's being done, they're going to read that, understand it, and move on. And that's going to speed up the process. You get less kickbacks, less explaining to do later on. The insured gets paid faster. And this is all done with the narrative report. And like Mike said, if you put a weak one up there, everyone's already suspect of your estimate right off the bat. So if we see those template items left in place as a template, We know you didn't do your job too thoroughly, and we know this is going to be a rough one to go through. But when you see those beautiful narrative reports, again, unfortunately for us, it's exciting because we know it's going to be good. And those adjusters that nail that, we want to send more claims to, because we like that experience of having a well-written narrative that explains what we're looking at, and then the photos document it. You can't beat it.
Okay.
One of the things I want to make clear here is that I can tell you some companies go, we don't read the narrative. We just look at the estimate and photographs, make sure it matches the final and the prelim report. But if they question the estimate, where's the examiner going to go? Your narrative. I can tell you on RCQCs that FEMA does, or audits that they do, they look at the entire claim. They want to make sure the narrative is explaining the loss and all the circumstances around it, and that the narrative matches the loss. And and that's FEMA. They do audit these claims. So consider that you're a professional. You're in this industry for a long time. In order to have sustainability, make sure you treat your job as a professional and you're writing complete, detailed narratives.
So the narrative is the story of the loss. A complete story of the loss.
As well as the photographs and the estimate and the final and the prelim. You could go on, but yeah, it's probably the top three.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's. We're running short on time here, but I want to hit the next slide, and this is something that every adjuster I know kind of qualms when they actually get their claims kicked back for certain things. So I know it's stressful to when you get this, but some of the things that I've always been told is remember that the examiner has more insights on what the carrier wants of the claim. And they have been instructed by you all, the IA firms, on what is needed for a claim more than what the adjusters have been. So you need to make sure that you adhere to that, as well as, the examiner has fresh eyes on the estimate. It's something like you step back, and a lot of the adjusters treat their claims as their baby. Well, they need to step back and let somebody else look at the fresh eyes on the estimate, because if the examiner brings something up, I've always told that the carrier will do the same thing. So anyways, I know that working with examiners is a tough subject, but maybe we can get some insight from Mike on this topic.
That's, working with examiners is only as tough as you want to push back against them. The examiner is your friend. They're going to make you look professional. They're going to make sure that you're allowed for everything in the estimate, and they're going to give you suggestions on the reply for corrections and stuff like that. I can look at the list of people attending here, and I see a lot of seasoned adjusters, and at the end of the day, you could be the smartest guy in the world regarding flood, but the smartest person in the flood process is that examiner who knows how to get that file paid. You get that file paid quickly, ultimately ends up you get paid quickly. So to push back against an examiner because you think you know more or you're right or this or that, I can respect that. But I also know how examiners need to get the claims paid because they're getting pressure from their supervisors and things like that. So when you're dealing with a company examiner and they're saying, hey, I respect you, but this is what needs to be, needs to be reviewed and considered. Please consider, add these, delete these, whatever, because you do this claim will be paid quickly. And that's the big thing. I mean, examiners are not your enemy. They're your friend. And they will make that every adjuster look that much better. And that's what you ultimately want. Because as you improve your flood file quality and you're hitting all the marks and that examiner has little kickbacks, guess what? You're going to get more losses in the future. So that's my 2 cents on examiners.
So I have a question for you, Mike. So we got all the information, we wrote the estimate, we got all the digital photos, we gathered all the information, we're ready for submittal. You bring it, I guess, is it better for you to send it to the examiner first, your claim and the whole package, once that's done, then present it to the insured for approval?
In our company, absolutely. We do not want the insured to see any adjuster's estimate until we have our eyes on it. So we ask that the adjuster complete the full report, all the documents, just as you would if you're turning the claim in. Let our examiners review it, make sure you got all the nuggets in there. They'll review the estimate, then we'll suggest some corrections. The adjuster will get those corrections. They'll review it, they'll implement those corrections, and at that point, we ask that the adjuster send the estimate to the policyholder and make a voice-to-voice call to have a conversation to review the estimate and any concerns. Normally, there's probably 80% of the time there's no concerns. The insured signs off, the adjuster rebundles, sends it to the examiner. There's a quick cursory review. It's done, it's uploaded to the client. But if an adjuster decides to say, I'm gonna send this out to the insured and get a proof of loss, and then we get the report, we're saying, what did you do here? Well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, you have to make these corrections. And then call the insured up and let them know that you made a mistake. Well, you lose credibility. We don't want that. We want the adjuster to have the best credibility as possible. So you should always let your examiners review it before any adjuster, let alone seasoned or unseasoned, decides to submit their estimate to the insured without their IA firm's eyes on it. What do you think, Steve?
Oh, absolutely agree with that. The one thing I would add to all of that is, as an adjuster, if you run into an examiner, especially during a catastrophe situation, that's just approving everything that you're sending in, you're going to want to hit the brakes on that real fast. And the temptation is great to let them go through, wow, I'm doing perfect reports, and this is fantastic, how fast everything is going. But the reality is the examiner's probably not looking at the files very carefully. And you need to alert the adjusting company that there might be an issue. We'll pull one of the files, review it, and see exactly what's going on, because you do want that examiner to thoroughly review your work. It's a very uncomfortable conversation when a FEMA quality audit happens and it's found to have critical errors. So that falls back on the examiner, and then it falls back on the adjuster. And if those pile up, that gets really sticky real fast. So you don't want those, I call them, it's terrible, but like a Stevie Wonder type examiner that just, oh, a new claim? Approved. They just make sure the invoice is correct. That's not good. It's not good at all. I personally reject 99.5% of every claim that I look at, because I am reading everything and I'm making sure there's not going to be a critical error that can be found in a FEMA audit. And I like to have revision rates or kickbacks or questions under 5%. And so we're very careful about that. Make sure your examiner is doing the work just like you're expected to do the work. Don't just think it's a great thing if it's going through real fast.
Okay, well, that's it for our time. And I would just like to say thank you very much for Steve and Mike for their participation. And with all their input, I believe that will create your perfect estimate. So do we have any questions? We're opening it up for questions now. Nicole, if you can read those off.
Okay, let's see here. Is there a way to find out the category of flood water and the chemicals components found in the water?
Yes.
What's the question?
Category 3.
Oh, category 3 water.
Yeah,
Okay.
if the water's going over the ground, which is what a general condition of flood is, it's contaminated. There's animal waste, there's fertilizer, there's garbage, you name it. Yes, it can get even worse if the flood happens next to a farm or a slaughterhouse. Then it's almost a serious situation where you got to gear up to go in there. But even clean water is category 3. So everything is treated as category 3. That's why if it's on the drywall soaks up the water, it's got to be removed. The carpet has to be removed. These aren't things that you necessarily clean. And the cost to clean something like that would exceed the replacement cost in a lot of situations.
So I don't think I have any more questions. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. I just want to thank Steve and Mike so much for participating. Your knowledge and your insights were amazing, and we really enjoyed your webinar. And thank you so much, guys. Have a safe evening, and everyone stay safe, please, and healthy. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.